In the shadow of the Rocky Mountains, a city nestled on the plateau. It was Thornton, Colorado, a living portrait of Americana. A place where neighbors shared secrets over picket fences and kids ran free until sunset painted the skies. Our guide through this landscape is Desmond Hughes, a middle-aged man weighed by the sands of time, yet buoyed by an inherent kindness that ebbed from him like a comforting warmth. He was a living testament to resilience, having lived through the worst kind of loss. The death of his wife had left a void in him, a void he sought to fill with the pursuit of justice as a private investigator. His small office in downtown Thornton spoke volumes of his character. The wall of diplomas, certificates, and accolades showcased his pursuit of excellence, while a single faded photograph of his late wife on the desk hinted at a softer, vulnerable side. The story truly begins with a woman walking into this office, anxiety etched on her face. "Mr. Hughes, I heard you're the best we've got in this town," she began, her voice trembling. She introduced herself as Sandra, a regular at the Nether Void, a nightclub that pulsated at the heart of Thornton. Sandra's problem was peculiar. "It's not about money, Mr. Hughes, but my identity. It was stolen. My credit cards, socials, everything. The strange thing is, I'm not alone. It's happened to others who frequent the Void too," she confessed, her fingers nervously playing with the strap of her purse. Desmond studied Sandra, a mixture of curiosity and concern blooming within him. His seasoned eyes could see she was genuine. He leaned back, steepling his fingers as he contemplated this unusual case. "I'll take it," he finally declared, drawn to the complexity and challenge of it. Career advancement was his beacon, guiding him through the uncertain territories of mysteries. Moreover, a part of him couldn't help but empathize with Sandra. The fear and uncertainty she felt were familiar companions of his own. The Nether Void, in its nocturnal splendor, was a curious anomaly, pulsating against the silent backdrop of Thornton. A symphony of kaleidoscopic lights, ebullient chatter, and resonating music created an atmosphere teetering on the precipice of hedonism and dread. Within its cavernous embrace, Desmond Hughes stepped lightly, his gaze sharp, his mind even sharper. As he navigated through the throng of patrons, he noted the frenzied dance of shadows on the walls, grotesque and monstrous forms intermingling with the rhythm of the music. Each shadow seemed independent of the person it belonged to, a subtle anomaly that sent chills down his spine. Yet the rational part of him, the seasoned detective, dismissed these apparitions as optical illusions, choosing instead to focus on the palpable. Over the course of several days, he submerged himself in the pulsating life of the nightclub. He interviewed clubgoers, bouncers, bartenders, anyone who could provide a thread of information. It was during one such interaction with a waitress, Jane, that he felt a significant shiver of dread. Jane, a lively woman with bright eyes and an easy smile, spoke of strange dreams she had since starting work at the club. "It's the shadows, Mr. Hughes," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They dance, they whisper, they watch." His conversations were interspersed with quiet observations, each one slowly knitting together a tapestry of the unexplainable. There was no logical motive, no traceable footprints, just an inexplicable connection between the Nether Void and its patrons. Days turned into weeks, and the nightclub gradually began revealing its underbelly. His skepticism was eroding, chipped away by the mounting evidence of the uncanny. He felt a subtle shift in his understanding. His previously unwavering beliefs about reality started to tremble like a candle in the wind. As he walked out of the club one night, he felt the weight of unease settle on him. The town of Thornton, bathed in moonlight, seemed to hold its breath, as if expecting the unraveling of some dreadful secret. Amidst dust-laden tomes and forgotten lore of the Thornton local library, Desmond found himself immersed in the town's history. Here he stumbled upon a piece of folklore attached to the land where the Nether Void now stood, a chilling tale of portals to dark realms and unspeakable travelers from beyond the veil of reality. Yet his hardened investigator's psyche remained resilient, resistant to lend credence to such unsettling tales. But as he delved deeper into his investigation, his steadfast grip on reality began to falter. He met with another victim, Amanda, a woman haunted by the same dread as Sandra. Amanda was different, though. Her words were cryptic, her gaze distant. "They whisper in my dreams, Mr. Hughes," she murmured, her voice fraught with a fear that seemed to spring from an abyss beyond our realm. "They wear us like masks, like it's a game." A chilling sense of apprehension ran through him. Amanda's testimonial rang similar to Jane's fears, and he could not dismiss the uncanny coincidence. Over time, his perceptions started to warp, his sense of reality bending under the pressure of the extraordinary. He began experiencing startling anomalies himself. Reality seemed to fold upon itself, manifesting as horrifying hallucinations that would strike him randomly. The world around him would transform into twisted alien landscapes of unfathomable geometry and then snap back into its mundane guise. These moments, although transient, struck him with a terror that gnawed at his sanity. Each hallucination left him shaken, yet his resolve remained undeterred. His curiosity, coupled with his profound empathy for the victims, continued to push him forward. As terrifying as these glimpses were, they also pulled back the curtain of normalcy, revealing the disturbing underbelly of the nether void. Desmond was gradually coming to terms with the horrifying truth that the nightclub was more than it appeared. Desmond was no longer the man he used to be. His eyes, once sharp with rationality, now bore the weary look of someone who has gazed into the unknowable abyss and carries its haunting imprint. The quiet town of Thornton, once a symbol of tranquility, had transformed into a terrifying stage set for a cosmic horror. His every waking moment was plagued by horrifying hallucinations. His own perception had become a nightmarish funhouse mirror, twisting and turning reality into grotesque shapes. He observed the people around him distorting into shadowy, alien figures, only to regain their human form in the blink of an eye. In this whirlwind of the grotesque and the unreal, he clung to the one constant he had left: the case. Following the breadcrumbs of uncanny events, he continued to investigate the victims' stories, their dreams, their fears. Each shared a common thread, an inexplicable connection to the nightclub. One evening, amidst a thunderous storm, he decided to confront the monster in its lair. He walked into the nether void, not as a visitor but a truth seeker, determined to unveil the cosmic horror at its core. As he entered, a shiver ran through him. The pulsating rhythm of the club, the dancing shadows on the walls, and the loud chatter of the patrons were drowned by a low hum. It was a frequency that seemed to resonate not with his ears, but with his very being. It filled him with an unutterable dread, a haunting melody that came from the heart of the nightclub, from the belly of the beast. It was in this gut-wrenching moment that the horrifying truth revealed itself. The nether void was indeed a gateway for interdimensional travelers. These creatures, forged in the fires of a realm beyond human comprehension, stole identities to cloak themselves in human form, preying upon the unsuspecting inhabitants of Thornton. His blood ran cold at the revelation. His reality, his sanity, his very existence were threatened by the unseen enemy. Yet there was a glimmer of hope. He was no longer chasing shadows, but faced a tangible enemy. His career as a private investigator, his yearning for justice, his empathy for the victims, had all led him to this point, preparing him to face the unimaginable. Desmond found himself at the heart of an alien storm. He carried with him the knowledge of a dreadful secret and the weight of a town's fate on his weary shoulders. His journey, once driven by a hunger for career advancement, had mutated into a fight for survival, a crusade to shield his unsuspecting town from a terror they could not fathom. He stood a solitary guardian, armed with the potent weapons of resilience and empathy. His days were no longer filled with the routine mundanity of an investigator's life. Now he devoted his time to studying the ancient lore from the library, looking for a clue, a weapon, or a defense against the interdimensional invaders. The complex alien glyphs in the books started to take a comprehensible form in his mind. The shadows of the cosmic abyss that once terrified him were beginning to reveal their secrets. He stumbled upon a symbol recurring across the ancient texts, a talisman of sorts. His instinct, honed by years of detective work, told him it was the key to shielding the victims from the creatures of the nether void. With renewed vigor, he immersed himself in crafting the symbol, pouring his resilience and determination into it. In the bowels of the following night, the pivotal confrontation took place. Desmond, armed with the symbol and the courage of the damned, walked into the club, which was once a symbol of pleasure and thrill, now pulsing with an alien energy, the haunting frequency echoing through its dark corners. As he stood there, he invoked the talisman. What followed was an eruption of raw cosmic energy. The club-goers screamed and panicked as the once shadowy figures of the interdimensional beings were revealed in their grotesque reality, their cloaks of humanity stripped away. The confrontation was a terror-fueled dance. Desmond fought with a ferocity born of desperation. The talisman served as a beacon of hope, a tool that seared the malevolent entities, sending them back into their dreadful realm. As dawn broke, the nether void was silent. The interdimensional travelers had been expelled, their grip over Thornton released. The town, still oblivious to the cosmic horror it narrowly escaped, stirred into a peaceful morning routine. Desmond's story had led him down a path that altered his reality and tested his sanity. Yet he came out stronger, a beacon of hope in the darkness of cosmic horror. Thornton, his town, was safe, oblivious of the dance it had performed at the edge of a cosmic abyss. Harold Finch, a weary sentinel of justice, walked the windswept streets of Boulder, Colorado. His gait bore the steadiness of time, etched into his bones from a lifetime of standing against the relentless onslaught of despair. The somber shadows of the homeless shelter, the heartbeat of Boulder's forgotten, drew him into its arms, pulling on unseen strings that resonated with his own wounds. Inside, the refuge bore a time-worn sadness, cradled by the cold embrace of rough brick and concrete. Dim lighting threw the huddled forms into sharp relief, each face an echo of life's cruel jests. A symphony of whispers reverberated through the shelter, a silent scream of 1,000 tales unseen and unheard. His history of loss bled into the confines of the shelter, mirroring the muted suffering of those he served. He saw his siblings in the watery eyes of the broken men and women, their shared pain offering him an intimate communion with these silent specters of society. "Mr. Finch," a raspy voice called. The old woman had a face deeply etched by time, lines running like canyons on a sun-bleached map. "Your heart, it's got kindness, yes it does." "Thank you, Miss Martha," he replied, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. "Just trying to lend a hand." In the quiet moments between serving soup and sharing wordless condolences, he sensed an uneasy undercurrent. The shelter staff, usually vibrant pillars of compassion, now moved with a skittish uncertainty, their eyes darting nervously, their conversation stilted. His curiosity piqued, he approached Amelia, a young woman with tired eyes and a warm smile who had been a fixture at the shelter for years. "Something seems off, Amelia," he ventured. "Everyone's on edge." She glanced around nervously before leaning in. "I don't know how to explain it, Harold," she whispered. "There's a heaviness in the air, and the patrons, they're changing." Intrigued, he pressed her for more. Amelia spoke of blackmail, a silent threat hovering over the shelter like a storm cloud. There were rumors of an unfamiliar drug, its origin cloaked in whispers and secrecy. The patrons affected by this unknown substance were scribbling strange symbols, their speech slipping into unfamiliar tongues. The scale of the problem sent a chill down his spine. "Don't worry, Amelia," he reassured her. "We'll get to the bottom of this." As he left the shelter that evening, under the brooding Colorado sky, he found himself tugged into a mystery that held no promise of easy answers. He resolved to untangle the enigma, his desire to protect this sanctuary from the approaching storm, overpowering the cold dread gnawing at his heart. As he disappeared into the night, the hushed tremors of a rotting haven echoed around him, their silence reverberating with the promise of a darkness yet to come. The morning sun clawed its way into the weary gray of Boulder skies, casting long skeletal shadows across the city. Harold stood before the homeless shelter, its weather-beaten facade betraying the secrets held within. His gaze wandered over the cracked paint and graffiti etched into the brick, a jumbled chronicle of 1,000 anonymous lives. And he knew there was a sinister secret yet to be added to the story. In the silence of the early dawn, the shelter breathed, a monolithic entity silently observing the world's indifference. This was his battlefield, and he was its solitary knight, armed with only truth and an unyielding spirit. A chilled gust stirred the meager foliage, a shiver running through the shelter's silent veins. The echoes of the abyss were growing louder. Once inside, he approached Amelia. Her spirit seemed wearied from the fight, eyes hollowed by the things she had seen and was yet to understand. They spoke in hushed whispers, a hidden dialect of despair and determination. He presented her with his plan of action, to trace the origins of the rumored drug, Knight's Embrace, and root out the cause of the shelter's malaise. Their trail led them through a labyrinth of Boulder's unseen underbelly, a realm where sunlight feared to tread. The cityscape became a backdrop to their grim pilgrimage, each alley and street a vignette of the city's silent suffering. In this forgotten world, they found whispers of the mysterious drug. Its legend hung heavy in the air, a ghostly pallor cast over those who had tasted its bittersweet embrace. They were plagued by erratic behavior, their tongues dancing to an ancient, unfamiliar rhythm, their hands crafting alien symbols onto the city's cold canvas. Harold Finch, the staunch realist, found himself teetering on the precipice of disbelief. The image of the disheveled man fervently etching cryptic symbols on the alley's grime-covered wall was a haunting nightmare slowly creeping into his reality. His path led him back to Amelia, her face a mirror of his disbelief. "It's worse than we thought, Harold," she confided, her voice just above a whisper. "It's not just a drug problem. It's like they're possessed." His promise to her was a beacon in the gloom. "We'll find a way, Amelia. We'll save them." With Amelia's confessions and the alarming behaviors of the drug's users, Harold found himself standing on the threshold of a terrifying abyss. It was a world twisted and writhing with unseen horrors that gnawed at the edges of human understanding. The echoes he heard were growing stronger. The darkness was deepening, and he knew he was not just fighting for the shelter anymore, but for the very soul of Boulder. The veil of normality was growing translucent in Boulder, reality thinning as the echoes of the abyss intensified. He felt the shift in the air, a dissonance vibrating in his bones as he sought out an old friend, one who could help him peer beyond the veil. The journey led him away from the bruised heart of Boulder towards a secluded house where Dr. Eleanor Blackwood, a reclusive pharmacologist, lived. Her dwelling was a solemn testament to solitude, a patchwork quilt of lichen-laden shingles and ivy-draped walls. The scent of age and dampness filled the air, a tangible echo of her self-imposed isolation. He had come bearing the unknown enemy, a sample of Knight's Embrace, carefully preserved. She peered at the substance with a mix of fascination and dread, her eyes reflecting a tempest of questions, her lips whispering the first hints of answers. Eleanor, a woman of science, found herself grappling with the realm of the inexplicable. The substance was unlike anything she had encountered before. Its composition hinted at realities that made her skin prickle with dread. It was not just a mind enhancer, but a conduit to something otherworldly. As she shared her findings, Harold's world tilted on its axis, the ground beneath his feet shifting as he stumbled upon a truth far stranger than fiction. Back at the shelter, he found himself standing before Amelia, his gaze carrying the weight of their plight. They spoke in the half-light, their dialogue a dance of shadows. Amelia's eyes widened in understanding as he shared Eleanor's conclusions. Her whisper cut through the silence. "So it's true then? They're communicating with something else?" Harold, in his gruff but comforting voice, affirmed, "That's what it seems. We're not dealing with just a drug problem, Amelia. We're facing something sinister." Armed with this revelation, he felt the cold tendrils of fear intertwining with his resolve. Yet his spirit remained undeterred. His resolve hardened like a diamond in the face of otherworldly pressure. His investigation led him to the seedy underbelly of Boulder, where the drug's presence was most profound. There, he stumbled upon a congregation of shadowy figures, their faces obscured by hooded cloaks gathered around a makeshift altar. Their murmured chants echoed through the dark alleyway, their bodies swaying to an ancient rhythm. As he observed, one of them brought out a vial of Night's Embrace, and as they consumed it, their voices became a single note, resonating with an unseen entity. It was a nameless horror, a dread deity they referred to as the voice from beyond. Witnessing the ceremony, his rational mind grappled with the sight, the undeniable evidence of a cosmic reality lacing its tendrils into his world. The veil had been lifted, the abyss echoed with chilling clarity, and he was left staring into the indomitable face of cosmic horror. The world was a weathered painting, its tones steeped in heavy shadows, as he navigated the labyrinthine alleys of Boulder's underbelly. Each step was a dance with danger, the echo of his footfalls a testament to his solitary struggle against the unseen. The voice from beyond awaited his challenge. A confrontation was inevitable. He had decided to approach the hooded figures he had observed, the dubious apostles of the enigmatic entity. The shrouded alleyway where they gathered now wore an unsettling silence, an ominous quiet that sang of hidden horrors. His heart drummed a frantic rhythm, his resolve a steady melody against its chaotic beats. "I've come to talk," Harold's voice echoed into the gaping maw of the alley. His words bore the weight of his mission, the audacity of a man challenging gods. To his surprise, the cult welcomed him. Their leader, a figure draped in darkest crimson, stepped forward. Beneath the cloak, the man's face was hollowed and lined, an echo of Harold's own war-worn countenance. He introduced himself as Lazarus and said that when he died in this world, he was reborn into the arms of the voice. Their dialogue was a taut string, a game of cat and mouse where every word carried unseen implications. Lazarus spoke of their deity, a being from beyond the veil of human comprehension, communicating through Night's Embrace. They believed the deity would usher in a new age, a world reborn in the image of their cosmic master. Harold's mind rebelled against the enormity of Lazarus's words, yet he held onto his unwavering spirit. His own voice found strength, arguing against the cult's blind faith, expressing the catastrophic repercussions of their actions. The air between them crackled with tension as he concluded, "You're playing with something far beyond us, Lazarus. You need to stop before it's too late." Lazarus's laugh echoed through the alley, a chilling symphony of madness. "It's already too late, Harold. The voice has spoken. We are merely its vessels." The profound sense of dread carved itself into Harold's spirit as he left the cult's lair, Lazarus's deranged laughter ringing in his ears. He knew that he was a solitary figure standing against a tide of cosmic madness, his steadfast determination the only barrier against the cataclysm that loomed over Boulder. With a sense of urgency thrumming in his veins, he returned to Amelia, their dialogue now heavy with impending catastrophe. Amelia, her spirit flickering like a lone candle in the face of a gathering storm, stood beside him. "We can't give up, Harold. There must be a way to stop this." Harold stood at the precipice of a monumental reckoning, the echoes of the abyss resounding through the silence of the Boulder night. The shelter, once a refuge for the forsaken, now sat at the epicenter of an impending cataclysm, the final battleground of a man and his war against the cosmic powers. The early hours of the morning had brought a strange stillness, the world holding its breath as if aware of the impending showdown. He was joined by Amelia and Dr. Eleanor, their camaraderie a bulwark against the encroaching dread. Their plan was audacious. They were going to disrupt the connection between the cult and their deity using a potent antidote developed by Eleanor. Its effectiveness was theoretical, an untested beacon of hope against the shrouded uncertainty of the abyss. Harold carried the weight of this gamble, the desperation of their situation pushing him further into the unknown. As the first light of dawn clawed its way into the somber sky, he approached the cult's gathering place. The scent of impending storm lingered in the air, a petrichor symphony that danced with his unease. The congregation was already in progress, Lazarus orchestrating the eerie ritual. As Harold broke into the circle, chaos ensued. Lazarus, his eyes ignited with fury and madness, recognized the threat. "You defy the voice, Harold!" he roared. Harold's response reverberated with defiant resolve. "I defy madness, Lazarus. This ends now." His voice echoed into the eerie silence, a lighthouse beam against the blackened tide of the cosmic sea. Then with a swift motion, Harold hurled the vial containing Eleanor's antidote into the midst of the ceremony. A brilliant white light erupted from the vial, illuminating the alleyway and halting the ritual in its tracks. The cult members, caught off guard, watched as the light penetrated their bodies, breaking their communion with the deity. Their anguished cries echoed through the alleyway, their connections severed, the chains of the voice shattered. But the victory came at a terrible cost. The entity, enraged by the interruption, lashed out, its cosmic anger ripping through the veil. Its sight fell upon Harold, the audacious mortal who dared challenge its will. He felt an overwhelming force bear down upon him, a paralyzing wave of cosmic fury that eclipsed his mortal coil. The world around him warped and twisted, his senses overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of the entity's wrath. He felt his life force ebbing away, his essence spiraling into the abyss. Yet even as his vision dimmed and his heart pounded its final beats, he held onto a single thought. He had protected his city, his loved ones. He had defied the cosmic dread and preserved his world. His sacrifice was not in vain. As he vanished into the unfathomable depths, he left behind a legacy of courage and resilience, a beacon of hope in the shadowed corners of Boulder. For in the grand tapestry of cosmic horror, there are always those who dare to challenge the void, who embrace the abyss not in surrender, but in defiant resistance. Harold Finch was one such soul, his name echoing through eternity as a testament to humanity's unwavering spirit. Theodore Lancaster, a vessel filled with the grit of determination, the generosity born of old scars, and a valor tempered in the crucible of past battles with unseen demons, stood solemnly at the edge of the looming labyrinth that was Westminster, Colorado. His pale blue eyes, hardened by years of unflinching confrontation with the truth, peered into the city's murky underbelly. Each wrinkle etched into his weather-beaten face was a testament to a story of a childhood marred by the gnawing pain of hunger, a youth spent grappling with the cold grip of addiction, and an adulthood defined by a relentless pursuit of truth. He carried these tales not as burdens, but as badges of honor, proud reminders of a journey that had chiseled an ordinary man into an extraordinary testament of resilience. He began his descent, initiating a series of interviews with the locals. He engaged with a nervous barkeep, whose eyes darted to the dark alleyway each time a sewer grate clanged in the distance. "Been hearing odd things, I have," he confided, his voice barely above a whisper. "Sounds coming from down below. Not right, they ain't." Then an old woman, Madame Leary, with her collection of stray cats, spoke of her darlings vanishing mysteriously. "One by one they disappeared," she wept, clutching an empty pet collar. "All I find are these," she revealed, a handful of strange symbols scratched onto tiny metal discs. Through the bustling streets and quiet corners of Westminster, Theodore moved like a shadow, absorbing the stories, the hints of a chilling narrative that seeped through the cracks of the city's facade. As the sun dipped below the skyline, painting the world in hues of impending dread, the city morphed. The once innocuous network of streets now seemed like veins leading to the heart of a colossal beast, the rhythmic tremors from the underground mimicking the pulsating beat of an unseen monstrosity lurking beneath. The city of Westminster had become a living entity, shrouded in an unsettling calm, its inhabitants blissfully unaware of the escalating terror beneath their feet. And amid the ignorance of the multitude stood one man, a lone sentinel named Theodore, pulled by the threads of truth towards the impending abyss. His resolve was hardened by the day's revelations and the city's unspoken fears. He stood before the entrance to the city's sewer system, the putrid stench of rotting decay weaving a macabre greeting. The chilling accounts he had collected led him here, into the belly of the darkness that undulated beneath the mundane, ready to swallow him whole. He steeled himself, stepping into the fetid darkness, leaving the world of the known behind and descending into the maw of the unknown. The labyrinthine veins of Westminster's sewer system unfurled before Theodore, an eerie spectacle of damp stone and shadow. A cold wind whispered through the blackened tunnels, carrying with it the ghostly echoes of the city above and the disturbing sounds of things that scuttled unseen in the dark. The stench of decay hung heavy in the dank air, seeping into his worn-out trench coat and stirring up ancient ghosts of his impoverished past. Memories, long since buried beneath layers of resilience, rose to the surface. His heart, a grizzled veteran of countless battles, skipped a beat. Yet he pushed forward, driven by the intoxicating allure of the truth that lay shrouded in the depths below. Around him, the brick-lined walls bore the scars of time, adorned with cryptic symbols that spoke of a hidden world. Marks of claw and strange weapons were etched into the hard stone, silent testaments to clandestine rituals conducted in the gloom. Yet he found no signs of the human touch, no trace of the weapons dealers, no sounds of hushed conversations or stealthy footsteps, just the slow drip of condensation from the arched ceiling and the occasional distant, echoing wail of a creature best left unseen. However, he heard something else beneath the echoes, an uncanny symphony that pricked at his senses. A throbbing hum, almost inaudible, but persistent enough to gnaw at the edges of his consciousness. It was a dissonant chorus that seemed to emerge from the very heart of the sewers, a throbbing pulse that resonated with an energy he couldn't comprehend. As he ventured deeper, his ever-watchful eyes noticed an unsettling pattern. The cryptic symbols were becoming increasingly complex, the markings on the walls more frenzied. He felt an oppressive weight in the air, a charge that tingled on his skin and tasted of iron on his tongue. He descended further into the abyss, the darkness wrapping around him like a shroud. His once reliable flashlight flickered, casting long, malformed shadows that danced upon the damp walls, teasing his imagination with visions of grotesque silhouettes. The labyrinth yielded nothing but a creeping sense of dread that clung to him, a dread that was not wholly unfamiliar. It echoed his own battles with addiction, the persistent whisper in the back of his mind, the relentless draw towards the abyss. His past and present entwined, blurring the lines between the metaphorical and the literal darkness that loomed ahead. Eventually, he reached an intersection, a confluence of the labyrinth's veins. The hum was louder here, a deafening pulse that reverberated through his bones. He raised his flickering flashlight, and as the beam of light cut through the darkness, his heart froze. In the cavernous chamber ahead, a bluish glow pulsed rhythmically, casting a spectral illumination that revealed an opening in the wall, a doorway into another realm, a portal that shimmered with an otherworldly energy and echoed with the cries of alien horrors from beyond. Fear coursed through him, but it was quickly replaced by the journalist's innate thirst for truth. With a deep, steadying breath, he stepped towards the pulsating portal, his heart echoing the rhythm of the throbbing hum of cosmic horror. The shimmering portal stood before him, an alien spectacle that seemed to distort the very fabric of reality. An unworldly aura rippled from it, a sight as awe-inspiring as it was terrifying, revealing a glimpse into a realm where the laws of nature bowed to an alien order. The spectral illumination refracted off the wet sewer walls, casting a ghostly dance of lights around the chamber. It painted the mundane world in hues of an unknown spectrum, bringing an ethereal beauty to the rot and decay. This was no longer the sewer system beneath Westminster. It was the antechamber to a reality far beyond human comprehension. The alien whispers that leaked from the portal intensified, their pitch and rhythm morphing into a symphony that resonated with his very soul. They sounded like tortured cries one moment and ecstatic hymns the next. It was an unsettling concert of alien emotions that played havoc on his sanity. The portal pulsed rhythmically, each beat seeming to synchronize with his own heartbeat. The pull was overwhelming, tugging at the seams of his reality, urging him to step into the unknown. It reminded him of the beckoning whispers of addiction that he had battled for years, a seductive siren song promising a respite from the mundane world. A shudder rippled through him. This wasn't the fear of an intrepid journalist standing before an unknown abyss. This was something much deeper. It was the dread of a man who had fought and bled for every inch of his sanity, now faced with a force that could unravel his mind like a ball of yarn. Despite the surging fear, he found himself drawn to the portal. Its alien allure resonated with his relentless pursuit of truth, his inner compulsion to uncover the mysteries of the world, no matter how terrifying. He took a step closer, the whispers crescendoing into a deafening roar, the portal's light intensifying, blinding him with its otherworldly brilliance. Suddenly, the reality he knew fractured, as visions from the other side seeped into his mind. Images of cyclopean structures that defied geometry, of celestial bodies that swirled in an eternal dance of cosmic horror, and of creatures so alien, so horrifying, that his mind recoiled in primal terror. The vision was brief, yet it felt like an eternity. As his mind was thrust back into the dank sewer, he was left gasping. The after-image of the horrors he had glimpsed burned into his retinas. He took a moment to gather his wits, his journalistic instincts forcing him to process the reality of what he had witnessed. The portal wasn't just a doorway to another world, it was a bridge to a realm that scoffed at the very concept of human understanding. It was a gaping maw into the cosmic abyss. Fear had momentarily paralyzed him, but his unwavering spirit began to stir. His gaze hardened, his grip on his flashlight tightened, and with the echoes of his past battles with addiction serving as a grim reminder of his resilience, he took another step towards the portal. This was no longer just an investigation. It was a fight against the cosmic horrors that lurked beyond the veil of reality. Stepping into the portal felt like stepping into a dream. Reality seemed to stretch and warp, his senses swallowed by a spectral tempest of unnameable colors and maddening whispers. It was a moment of cosmic vertigo, a terrifying plunge into the depths of an alien abyss. When the distortion subsided, Theodore found himself in a realm that defied comprehension. This alien landscape was not beholden to the laws of nature he knew. It spat in the face of logic and geometry. Towering structures of impossible architecture punctuated a skyline illuminated by the spectral light of celestial bodies that twisted and writhed in an eternal dance. Around him, indescribable entities moved, creatures that existed beyond the spectrum of human understanding, their forms a grotesque symphony of chaos and beauty. Their voices were the whispers he heard, a language that seemed to bypass his ears and echo directly within his mind, carrying emotions that ran the gamut from ecstatic joy to agonizing despair. The dread that had initially consumed him gradually morphed into a morbid fascination. The overwhelming horrors around him were slowly becoming a siren song, drawing him deeper into this labyrinth of cosmic monstrosities. At the heart of this alien landscape, he felt a presence, a dark power that seemed to seep through every atom of its reality. It was a force that was as terrifying as it was intoxicating, a sensation that reminded him of the allure of addiction, a promise of an escape from the mundane, of a respite from his personal demons. As he moved closer to this dark power, he felt it acknowledging his presence. It was an ancient consciousness, a cosmic entity that existed beyond the confines of time and space. It seemed to scrutinize him, a man standing on the precipice of sanity, teetering on the edge of an abyss that promised to swallow him whole. The entity seemed to communicate with him, its voice a melody of alien thoughts that washed over his consciousness. It seemed to know his past, his struggles, his victories. It knew of his battles with addiction, of his relentless pursuit of truth. It promised him understanding, a chance to see the universe from a vantage point that transcended the limits of human comprehension. The entity's offer was tempting. In his heart, Theodore felt the same tug he had felt in his battles with addiction, a craving for an escape, a yearning for a solace that seemed just within his reach. The parallel was not lost on him, his past and present once again colliding in a poignant reminder of his lifelong struggle. He stood there on the threshold of sanity, staring into the cosmic abyss that beckoned him. The journey from the familiar streets of Westminster to this alien landscape had been a dizzying descent, yet it was a journey he had chosen, a path he had walked willingly. Despite the overwhelming terror and the crushing weight of his insignificance in the face of this cosmic horror, he felt a grim determination set in. His past battles with addiction had taught him that surrender was not an option. His final thoughts, as he stood on the precipice of this alien world, were of the world he had left behind, blissfully unaware of the terrors lurking beneath their feet. The final step felt like the longest Theodore had ever taken. It was a step away from the world he knew, a step away from the man he was, a step into the embrace of the cosmic abyss. The alien landscape seemed to warp around him, the impossible structures bending inwards, as if in reverence to the dark power. The celestial bodies spiraled in a dance of unimaginable chaos, their ethereal lights painting the horizon with hues of unworldly splendor. The entities around him ceased their grotesque ballet, turning their attention to the lone human standing before the dark power. Their indescribable forms quivered in anticipation, the alien symphony of their voices reaching a crescendo that echoed within his consciousness. In the pulsating heart of this alien realm, the dark power awaited. Its presence was overwhelming, a cosmic behemoth that dwarfed his existence. He could feel it scrutinizing him, peeling back the layers of his psyche, unearthing his deepest fears and greatest triumphs, his battles with addiction, his relentless pursuit of truth. This was a power that didn't simply exist in this realm. It was the realm. It was the alien structures, the celestial bodies, the grotesque entities. It was the very fabric of this reality, a consciousness woven into the cosmic tapestry of the universe. The dark power's whispers turned into a haunting lullaby, a melody that seemed to resonate with his very soul. It offered him a place among the cosmic elite, a chance to shed his humanity, to transcend his mortal coil. It promised an escape from his past, from the chains of his addiction, from the confines of his reality. Despite the dread gnawing at him, Theodore felt the allure of the dark power's promise. It wasn't just the thrill of the unknown or the temptation of power that tugged at his heart. It was the promise of escape, an escape from the relentless trials and tribulations of his life, an escape from his past and from himself. Yet as he stood on the precipice of the abyss, a single thought floated to the surface of his mind. Every battle he had fought, every demon he had conquered, every scar etched onto his soul had made him the man he was. To surrender to the abyss was to deny his journey, his struggles, his victories. It was to deny himself. With that realization, Theodore made his choice. He took a deep, steadying breath and stepped towards the dark power, not in surrender, but in defiance. He stepped forward as a man who knew his place in the universe, a man who understood his insignificance in the grand cosmic ballet, yet refused to bow down. As he stepped into the embrace of the dark power, he did so not as a victim, but as a participant. He surrendered not to the abyss, but to his destiny. His last thought, as the dark power enveloped him, was not one of fear, but of acceptance. Beneath the heavy cloak of the setting sun, the world rested in a palette of fading light and lengthening shadows. The quaint town of Longmont, Colorado, wore its twilight attire, a medley of peaceful resignation to the night and anticipation of a brand new day. Amid the dulcet hush, a lone figure shuffled down the dimly lit main street, his silhouette intermittently cloaked by the yawning darkness. Elijah Crane, a private investigator by trade and a guardian of the lost in spirit, moved with an air of quiet sincerity. His eyes, sharp yet pained, bore the weight of a haunted past. Anxiety had made a home in the crevices of his heart, its tendrils reaching out and clutching the reins of his life. In his solitude, though, there was strength, a resilience fostered by regret and loss. As he moved closer to the outskirts of town, Crane found himself standing before the ominous figure of an abandoned warehouse. This derelict structure, partially swallowed by the gathering dusk, was his latest enigma, the center of a web of unsolved disappearances. "You're one ugly son of a gun, aren't you?" he mumbled, his voice barely a whisper against the cold Colorado breeze. His fingers toyed with a dog-eared photograph of a young woman, a recent entrant to Longmont's growing list of disappearances. He turned as the sound of crunching gravel announced a visitor. "Elijah," greeted Sheriff Lewis, his weathered features etched with concern. "I've been looking for you." "And here I am," Crane replied. His eyes never left the warehouse, but his fingers ceased their nervous dance around the photograph. The sheriff sighed heavily, his gaze also pulled towards the warehouse. "Elijah, are you sure you're up for this? This case? It's different." Crane nodded, his gaze softened as he looked at the photograph in his hand. "I need to find her, Lewis. I can't let another one be lost." "You're a good man, Crane." "Too good for this damn place," Lewis muttered, patting Crane's shoulder before walking away, leaving him alone with the echo of his words in the chilling silence of the warehouse. In the quiet solitude of twilight, Crane was once again the lighthouse in the storm, his steadfast resolve a stark contrast to his humble demeanor. He was pulled towards the labyrinthine mystery, his trauma fueling his mission. Yet as the last vestiges of daylight died around him, Crane felt an unsettling shiver. It wasn't just the chilling wind or the mournful lament of the abandoned warehouse. It was a stirring within him, a foreshadowing of darkness. But as his shadow stretched long and weary beneath the pale moonlight, he was ready to step into the unknown. Morning broke over Longmont, shattering the sanctuary of the previous night's shadows with its relentless light. Crane had spent the entire night wrestling with dreams, ones punctuated by shadowy figures and the haunting echo of the warehouse's silence. Now, as the daylight intruded into his modest living quarters, he found himself drawn to an unmarked envelope lying on his doorstep. He picked up the envelope gingerly, his fingers brushing against the rough texture of the paper. His heart pounded in his chest as he unfolded the letter, revealing the cryptic contents within. A series of archaic symbols, like skeletal fingers reaching out from the parchment, sent a chill up his spine. Interspersed were fragments of the local folklore, stories he had dismissed as fables, and half-remembered dreams of the town's older inhabitants. Whispers of the ancients, the bartender at Pete's Pub, Old Grady, had called them. A collection of tales revolving around eldritch entities that lurked in the unseen corners of reality. Now those whispers seemed to come alive in the cryptic letter in his hands. A knock on his door jolted him from his thoughts. It was Sheriff Lewis, his furrowed brows suggesting a sleepless night similar to his own. "Elijah," Lewis began, his voice holding a hint of hesitation, "I heard you've been digging around asking questions." Crane nodded, gesturing towards the cryptic letter on his desk. "And getting answers I never anticipated, Lewis." The sheriff glanced at the symbols, a chill creeping into his eyes. "These stories, they're old, older than any of us here. I used to think they were just scare tales for kids." "And now?" Crane probed, his gaze steady on Lewis. "Now," Lewis sighed, "I'm not so sure. Be careful, Elijah." Left alone once again, Crane stared at the cryptic symbols, feeling the weight of unspoken dread pressing against him. The warehouse, now tied to these arcane whispers, beckoned him like a dark star pulling him into its orbit. His intuition as a private investigator, mingled with the raw, empathic nature of his soul, urged him forward. If these whispered secrets held the key to the missing people of Longmont, then he would have to brave the shadows and face whatever lurked within. As the sun began its descent, painting Longmont in hues of twilight once again, he found himself standing before the warehouse, its darkness more profound, more menacing. The whispers of the shadows seemed louder, and he felt the edges of his reality beginning to fray. Unseen threads were weaving an insidious plot, their chilling hum hinting at a cosmic horror that lay in wait, and Crane, against all odds, was determined to confront it. Underneath the vast umbrella of the Colorado night sky, The full moon hung heavy, casting an ethereal glow over the landscape. Longmont, with its houses nestled close and its streets eerily quiet, felt suspended in time. At the heart of this moon-kissed town, an old warehouse brooded, its foreboding aura twisting the lunar brilliance into a sinister pallor. Elijah Crane, with each passing day more enigmatic detective than man, felt the peculiar tug of the moonlight. Sleep eluded him, replaced by the insistent whispers of a hidden world. His quiet apartment was no longer a sanctuary, but rather a launching point into the abyss of the unknown. Stepping outside, he found himself drawn towards the warehouse, the magnetic pull now undeniable. His footsteps echoed in the still night, a solitary percussion in the orchestra of silence. The chilling symbols of the cryptic letter were etched into his memory, their silent promise of revelations compelling him. The warehouse, under the influence of the moonlight, appeared different. Its usual foreboding demeanor transformed into a surreal beauty. He steeled himself, feeling the icy grip of anxiety inching up his spine, but his determination held stronger. Crane approached the warehouse, his heart pounding the rhythm of a somber dirge. Inside, he found a hidden passage, one that led him into a concealed basement bathed in an unnatural, sickly green luminescence. What he saw next could only be described as a grotesque tableau straight from a fever dream. A group of shadowy figures partaking in an unholy ritual, the air thick with the scent of terror and the cruel harmony of chants in a forgotten tongue. His eyes widened as he caught sight of a familiar set of symbols inscribed within the circle of the ritual. His name, somehow intertwined with the alien letters, emerged from the unsettling pandemonium. A stark revelation hit him like a punch to the gut. He wasn't the hunter in this cosmic game, but the hunted. "You have finally arrived, Elijah Crane," echoed a disembodied voice, pulling him back from his thoughts. The ritual, the traffickers, the warehouse, everything had been a setup, a trap designed to draw him into their web. His world spun, but he clung to his wits. He'd become a piece in a cosmic game that threatened not just his sanity, but the very fabric of reality. As he stumbled out of the warehouse, the night seemed darker, the shadows more menacing. A terrifying journey lay ahead, one that promised a descent into the maws of the unfathomable. The next move was his, and time was a luxury he no longer had. In the world outside his small Colorado town, the sun rose and set, oblivious to the cosmic terror that had ensnared Elijah Crane. Time felt distorted, a malleable entity under the influence of forces far beyond his understanding. His modest apartment was now a bastion against the alien dread that had come to claim him. Each day, his investigation into the slave traders receded further into the shadows, replaced by a struggle to keep his sanity amidst an onslaught of otherworldly phenomena. Shadows grew longer and whispered darker tales. The walls of his home seemed to breathe. The mirror reflected a world just out of sync with his own. It felt like being trapped in a chillingly familiar nightmare, yet he was acutely aware of its reality. His anxiety, once a silent tormentor, had evolved into a constant companion in this new, horrifying existence. He could see it in the mirror, hear it in the whispers, feel it in the cold dread that clung to him like a second skin. One evening, Sheriff Lewis paid him a visit, his face etched with worry. "Elijah," he started, his voice trembling. "You've been holed up in here for days. The town's talking." Crane managed a grim smile. "If only they knew what I was up against, Lewis." "You're fighting shadows, Crane," Lewis replied. "Shadows that might not even exist." "But they do exist, Lewis," Crane retorted, his gaze drifting to the unmarked letter on his table. "And they want something from me, something I cannot give." Lewis sighed, patting Crane's shoulder before leaving him alone once more. The silent farewell of a friend who didn't understand but wished he could. Crane was alone again in his fight against the cosmic abyss, a mere mortal at the heart of a cosmic whirlpool, being sucked into an unholy descent. The only way out was through, he realized. He would have to confront the cosmic horror and hope he emerged at the other side. He was no longer just a detective. He was a man who had peered into the abyss and was determined to fight it. Longmont awoke to an uncharacteristically gloomy dawn, a pall of unease enveloping the town like a shroud. It was as if the fabric of reality itself had grown taut, expecting an impending rending. At the center of it all, Elijah Crane prepared himself for the final confrontation. His home no longer offered the sanctuary it once did. The walls seemed closer, the air thicker, and the shadows pulsed with a life of their own, their inky bodies rippling like serpents in the dim light. Each shadow whispered of impending doom, their voices a cacophonous symphony in the otherwise silent morning. Crane sat at his desk, his fingers tracing the archaic symbols on the cryptic letter that started it all. "I'm not what you want," he muttered to the empty room, the weight of his fate pressing down on him. The morning wore on, bringing with it a shift in the air. A peculiar energy pulsed through the town, its origin emanating from the warehouse. The moment had arrived. He left his apartment for what he knew might be the last time, his steps echoing in the desolate streets. As he approached the warehouse, it was as if reality was folding in on itself, the air warping and shimmering like heat over an asphalt road. He could hear them again, the chants in the forgotten language, their discordant melody tearing at his sanity. He stepped into the warehouse, the familiar, sickly green luminescence bathing the room. The shadowy figures stood in the center of their unholy circle, his name echoing around him. He could feel their eyes on him, their expectation a tangible force in the air. But he was resolute. He had come prepared for this face-off, armed with an unyielding will to protect his reality, his town. With every fiber of his being, he resisted their call, their attempt to pull him into the cosmic abyss. And then, in a moment of intense clarity, he felt a shift, a change within him. He was no longer just the hunted, the prey of cosmic entities. He was Elijah Crane, a man who had been through the abyss and came out stronger. The anxiety that once crippled him was now his anchor, grounding him amidst the cosmic storm. "Enough!" he bellowed, his voice ricocheting off the walls. The figures recoiled, the chants faltered. He held his ground, his stance defiant. The cosmic entities, surprised by his resilience, faltered. In that moment, he felt a surge of energy, a desperate push against the nightmarish reality. With a final defiant cry, he managed to tear himself away from the entities, ripping his name from their cosmic script. Reality snapped back, the warehouse returning to its usual ominous self. The shadowy figures vanished, their chants fading into nothingness. He stumbled out of the warehouse, gasping for air. He had done it. He had escaped from the inescapable. He had confronted the cosmic horror and lived to tell the tale. His escape, however, came at a cost. As the sun set over Longmont, he felt a change within him. He was different now, reshaped by the ordeal. He had faced his worst fears and emerged victorious, forever changed in a way only cosmic horror could achieve. As dawn spilled its honeyed glow across Loveland, the contours of the Rocky Mountains seemed to huddle closer together, whispering tales of mysteries that lay cloaked in their craggy expanse. Amid this postcard tableau, the city of Loveland breathed with its own peculiar rhythm, its heartbeat found not just in its vibrant streets, but in the quiet whispers of secrets that rustled beneath its calm facade. In the heart of this city, ensconced within his study, Detective Samuel Travers mulled over an unusual case file. He was an imposing figure, a tower of strength hewn from resilience and courage, and yet the shadows of a quiet fear lurked in the creases of his stern expression. Every mention of heights, every echo of altitude, had his heart thrumming an urgent beat, an old phobia stirred by a trauma he kept wrapped tightly within himself. The peaks of the Rockies looming on the horizon were a constant reminder of his secret fear. St. Adelaide's Orphanage. The words seemed innocent enough, yet a trickle of unease crawled down his spine. He found himself drawn into the swirling vortex of allegations that surrounded the sanctuary for the forsaken. Smuggling, they said. But the files he had didn't weave a consistent story. It was the incongruity that tugged at him, echoing some forgotten tune of conspiracies that had once motivated his every move. "Sam," came a voice, gentle as the rustling autumn leaves, breaking his contemplation. Victoria Marlowe, his stalwart partner and the town's deputy, leaned in the doorway. Her sharp gaze held an air of conviction, a fire that was tempered by the compassion she carried in her heart. The local folks adored her, and Samuel had often found solace in their camaraderie, especially during his darkest hours. Now he needed her steady presence, her pragmatic mind to navigate through the case. "Strange, isn't it?" she queried, looking at the file in his hand, her voice a soothing balm against the brewing storm in his mind. "St. Adelaide's, a hub for smuggling." Samuel nodded, his gaze distant. The town of Loveland, he reflected, had always been a symbol of tranquility. It was a place that promised a quiet life, nestled between the motherly arms of nature. Yet it seemed even this serene town held its share of ghouls, lurking behind its charming veneer, masquerading as parts of benign institutions. "The plot is lousy, as if the conspirators want us to know," he muttered, his eyes meeting Victoria's. She understood his concerns, the undercurrents of his thoughts. They had worked long enough together to communicate without uttering much. A shiver ran down his spine as he glanced at the towering mountains, his unease churning into a full-blown dread. The specters of the mountains, their dark secrets in the case of St. Adelaide's, were beginning to merge into a haunting melody that held him captive. As the sun dipped behind the mountains, casting long, monstrous shadows, he felt himself teetering on the edge of a cliff, staring into an abyss he had no choice but to descend into. With a decisive nod at Victoria, he whispered, "We start tomorrow, at dawn." The morning came wrapped in a veil of mist, as if the day itself held its breath in anticipation of what was to be unveiled. St. Adelaide's Orphanage, a grand, time-worn edifice that whispered tales of yore, stood against the backdrop of the Rockies. Its ivy-clad walls, mullioned windows, and weathered spires spoke of a benign presence. Yet as Samuel and Victoria approached its gates, an uncanny stillness gripped the air, as though the very stones of the building held secrets nestled deep within their heart. Stepping inside, they were greeted by the orphanage matron, a kindly figure whose smile did little to dispel the lurking disquiet. Her eyes, twin pools of shadow, held a flicker of unspoken stories. As they began their investigation, the normalcy of the setting seemed to clash with the sinister undertones of the accusations. They found their inquiries met with polite, innocuous responses. Yet beneath the orphanage's calm rhythm, they could sense an aberrant undertow. During a tour of the facility, they passed by a grand staircase that spiraled upwards, its apex vanishing into darkness. Samuel felt a cold shudder of apprehension. The fear of heights that usually lay dormant within him surged, a phantom pain of dread that pulsed in synchrony with the mysteries the building held. But there was no option to retreat. He pressed on, his fear and curiosity intertwining in a bitter dance. As they delved deeper into the day, oddities began to punctuate the normalcy. Unseen figures flitting in the corner of their eyes, fleeting whispers carried on the wind, doors creaking without provocation, and sudden chills that seized the warmest rooms. Victoria, too, felt the prickle of disquiet, her sharp gaze catching the subtle dissonance between what was seen and what was perceived. "Strange place, this," she confided, her voice barely a whisper in the ancient halls of St. Adelaide's. "Even the walls feel as if they're holding their breath." Samuel nodded, feeling the echoes of the past layering with the whispers of the present. Every interaction, every corner of the orphanage seemed to be shrouded in a silken web of enigma. "A riddle wrapped in a mystery," he muttered, his gaze lost in the twisting staircase that stood as a symbolic representation of their spiraling confusion. Their conversation was interrupted by a child's laughter, bright and piercing, echoing through the desolate hallways. They turned to look, but there was no one in sight, only the echoes of their own heartbeats rebounding off the cold stone walls. As dusk cloaked the orphanage in shadows, they took their leave, their minds tangled with more questions than when they had arrived. Samuel could feel a foreboding chill gnawing at his resolve. The orphanage, its staff, the children, and Victoria, everything seemed to swim before his eyes in a surreal montage of unease. The path ahead was a mystery, a climb into the unknown, whispering promises of darker revelations that awaited them in the shadows. The following days unfolded like a languid nightmare, each more fraught with a subtle unease than the last. Samuel and Victoria continued to unravel the complex tapestry of St. Adelaide's, the disturbing undercurrents becoming more tangible, yet still elusive to their grasp. Every night, the spectral image of the orphanage haunted Samuel's dreams, mingling with his fear of heights to birth surreal nightmares that left him in a cold sweat. One evening, as a storm raged over Loveland, he sat alone in his study, trying to connect the disjointed threads of their investigation. His eyes fell on a half-hidden photograph in one of the case files. As he pulled it out, his heart skipped a beat. It was a snapshot of Victoria, her arm linked with a stranger's, standing in front of St. Adelaide's. His mind whirred as he traced the lines of Victoria's familiar smile and the clandestine glance she shared with the stranger. It was a moment frozen in time that hinted at unspoken complicity. The storm outside mirrored the turmoil within his mind. Betrayal was a bitter draft, its poison seeping into the cracks of his trust. Victoria, the one beacon of stability in this growing abyss, was now a source of suspicion. Yet there was something in her, in their shared past, that urged him to seek answers before condemning her. Confrontation was a cruel dance, and as he met her the following day, he felt an uncanny dread grip his heart. In her eyes, he sought the truth, the proof that the photograph was just a misunderstanding. But as he presented it to her, the flicker of surprise that danced in her eyes was quickly replaced by a steely resignation. She sighed, her voice barely a whisper against the oppressive silence that lay between them. "It's not what it looks like, Sam," she began, but her words trailed off, her gaze shifting away. Her silence was more damning than any confession, a tacit admission that shrouded their partnership in a cloud of betrayal. As he left, the weight of her betrayal pressed heavily against him, transforming the quaint streets of Loveland into an alien landscape. Each gust of wind, each rustle of leaves seemed to whisper the bitter tale of treachery. The orphanage stood in the distance, its silhouette a monstrous specter against the mountains. Staring up at the imposing heights of the Rockies, Samuel felt an uncanny terror uncoil within him. His fear of heights, the looming presence of the orphanage, and Victoria's betrayal were conspiring to birth a monstrous dread. The weight of the unseen horror ahead seemed to parallel the fear he felt when looking at the towering peaks. Unraveling the conspiracy would now mean confronting not only his fear, but the horrifying depths of betrayal as well. Alone in his pursuit now, Samuel found himself drawn back to the haunting specter of the orphanage. The stony facade seemed to leer at him, the arched windows and high spires mimicking grotesque faces, twisted in an unholy grimace. As he stepped into the labyrinthine edifice, the uncanny silence hummed with an undercurrent of anticipation, as if the orphanage itself was conscious of his purpose. His search took him into the forgotten corners of St. Adelaide's, down cellar steps slick with moisture and grime, through cobweb-laden corridors that groaned with age, into rooms filled with strange artifacts that reeked of an alien origin. His investigation had taken a sinister turn. He was no longer tracking a mere smuggling operation, but something far more ancient, far more dreadful. One such artifact caught his attention. It was an antique box intricately carved with symbols that seemed to writhe under his gaze. As he reached out to touch it, a sudden frigid gust swept through the room, extinguishing the lantern in his hand. Then there was silence, a silence so absolute that he could hear the deafening roar of his own heartbeat. Out of the shadows emerged a figure, the stranger from the photograph with Victoria. His appearance was as startling as his words. He spoke of sacrifices, of cosmic entities from dimensions inconceivable to the human mind, puppeteers who controlled the threads of reality, and of Victoria's involvement in these ghastly rites. He felt his mind reel as the stranger spoke, his words weaving a terrible tapestry of cosmic horror. A betrayal that was not merely of trust, but of humanity itself. Victoria, his ally, was an agent of these entities, a cog in the grand cosmic machine of horror. He was trapped in a narrative that defied logic, yet his journey into the depths of St. Adelaide's was proof enough that this was reality, a reality more terrifying than his worst nightmares. Staring at the ancient symbols on the box, he felt an overwhelming dread. The fear of heights that had once haunted him seemed insignificant now. Instead, he was standing at the edge of an abyss of cosmic terror, staring into the unfathomable depths of a reality that promised nothing but madness and despair. As he left the orphanage that day, the sun was sinking behind the mountains, casting long, monstrous shadows over Loveland. Samuel was no longer just a detective investigating a smuggling operation. He was a solitary figure on a bleak landscape, waging a war against unseen cosmic horrors that lurked in the shadows. The strings of his fate were being pulled by an unimaginable terror, and the puppet show was far from over. The world that Samuel once knew was splintering, each fragment reflecting a surreal tableau of cosmic horror. The serenity of Loveland had been replaced by a spectral gloom, the quaint charm of the city streets drowned in the echoing screams of unseen entities. And at the heart of it all was St. Adelaide's, its silhouette an omnipresent reminder of the sinister puppet show orchestrated by the cosmos itself. Confronting Victoria was a task that required strength that he felt was dwindling with every passing moment. Yet he knew he had no other choice. She had been his partner, his ally, and if she was indeed entwined in this horrifying conspiracy, he needed to face her one last time. The confrontation was nothing short of a surreal nightmare. Victoria, once the symbol of law and order, was now a chilling image of cosmic dread. As she confessed to her part in the macabre puppet show, her voice held a dissonance that echoed the discord of their reality. The woman he knew was merely a facade, behind which lurked an agent of unspeakable horror. She was an integral cog in the unseen cosmic machinery, orchestrating an ancient rite in the heart of Loveland. In the face of her confession, Samuel felt a crushing despair. It was not merely the sting of betrayal, but the crushing weight of a reality that seemed hell-bent on pushing him into the realm of madness. Yet amidst the dread and despair, he found a vestige of courage, a stubborn will to survive, to escape the cosmic puppet show he was ensnared in. He knew he could not fight the unseen entities, the dread that seemed to seep into every aspect of Loveland, but he could escape it. And so he fled, leaving behind the life he once knew, the partner he once trusted, and the city he once loved. He found himself on the edge of the city, staring up at the towering peaks of the Rockies. His phobia of heights, once a crippling fear, now seemed inconsequential. He had faced a fear far more profound, far more terrifying, the fear of the unseen. With one last glance at the distant silhouette of St. Adelaide's, he ventured into the wilderness. Each step he took was a step away from the horrifying reality he had left behind. Yet as he fled, he couldn't shake off the eerie feeling of unseen eyes watching him, of spectral whispers echoing in the wind, a constant reminder of the cosmic puppet show that continued to unfurl in the heart of Loveland. His escape was but a Pyrrhic victory. He had survived, but at what cost? Samuel Travers, once a symbol of courage and justice, was now a fleeting shadow, forever on the run from the horrifying puppet strings of the cosmos. His story was a testament to unimaginable horror, a chilling reminder that some secrets, some conspiracies, are too terrifying to unveil. For they do not merely shatter one's peace, they fracture the very fabric of one's reality. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed our content, show your support with a like and subscribe, and stay notified by hitting the bell icon. Expect more cosmic horror from Eldritch Tales Factory, and feel free to explore our other stories. See you in the next video.